All right, guys, for this lesson, we're going to be factoring trinomials of the form x squared plus bx plus c. The trinomial does have three terms. That's why it's called a trinomial. I'm going to underline it here. So it's a trinomial with three terms. And as you can see, here it is. It's in this form. X squared plus bx plus c. Now, I have it written in standard form. Standard form is when you go by the degree of each term and put it in order from highest degree to lowest degree. We talked about that in the unit we were in before we got out for school in March. So if you look right here at this one, the degree is 2. The degree is just the exponent or the sum of the exponents in a term. So here the exponent is 2, the degree is 2. Here the exponent for the variable is 1, the degree is 1. Here, this is some constant. Your degree is 0. C stands for some constant. Your degree is 0. So in standard form, since this is in standard form, the degree is 2. That's the greatest one out of 2, 1, and 0. And the leading coefficient is 1. The leading coefficient is 1 because your degree is 2, and your leading coefficient is the coefficient that leads this trinomial. But what leads this trinomial? The term x squared. What's the coefficient for x squared? It's simply 1. So we say the leading coefficient is 1. Now look at these side notes. It says b is the coefficient of the middle term, or x. So here's my middle term. This b just stands for the coefficient of whatever x is. Now, if they're out of order, suppose bx is not in the middle. Well, okay, don't worry about that because you're really basically looking at this part, the term with the degree of 1. So you find the term with the degree of 1, even if it's out of order. Suppose bx was over here and c was right here. Then bx still has a degree of 1 regardless of where it is. So what you would need to do is put it in standard form and you'll be able to see the middle term. Okay? Or just say b is still your coefficient of x regardless of wherever it is. And like I said, it doesn't have to be in order, but you should be able to see that this has a degree of 1. So that whatever has a degree of 1 represents your middle term, even if it's out of order. Okay, guys? C is some constant. It's just a regular number. All right, so that's our recall information. And so let's just go into factoring polynomials of the form x squared plus bx plus c. But actually, before we get into it, I want to show you some sum and product puzzles before we actually get into factoring. Here, it's going to say an A of C, an A of 1. So I know it says an A of 1 right here. That A is just an understood 1 that's just right there. Notice this is B and then C. So we call that leading coefficient A. Whatever your leading coefficient is, we call it A. And now let's make a little note. The leading coefficient is called A. Okay, it's denoted as an A. So anytime I ask you what is A, then you find the leading coefficient for me. All right, so forget all that for a minute. Let's go. We're going to shift gears and go to sum and product puzzles. Sum means what you get once you add. Product means what you get after you multiply. So we're going to be adding and multiplying to get these numbers, all right? So let's read. It says, in each diagram below, write the two numbers on the sides of the x that are multiplied together to get the top number of the x. So I need numbers that I multiply to get -6, but added together to get the bottom number of the x. So I need numbers I can multiply to get -6, but yet add together to get -1. All right, so let's get started. So I need numbers that multiply together to get -6. In other words, I'm looking for the factors of -6. But yet I'm looking for the sum of -1. So they have to multiply to get -6, add up to get -1. So if you think about it, when your product is negative, that means that the signs have to be different. You can't have a negative times a negative and get a negative. And you can't have a positive times a positive and get a negative. The only way to get a negative product is to have different signs. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and label that one of these is negative and the other one is positive. So I'm just making little notes. All right, now I have to decide which one is going to be, is the larger number going to be negative or is the larger number going to be positive? So to decide that, I go look down here. Okay, I don't want that. Let me undo the way it moved. All right, so to decide that, I look down here. So if this number is negative, the larger one is negative. If this number is positive, the larger one is positive. If that makes sense. And the reason why the larger one has to be negative in this case is because if you subtract two numbers, you keep the sign of the larger number. So if I subtract like -6 and 2, -6 plus 2 ends up being -4. So I get a negative, but just not -1. -6 times 2 gives me -12. And let me show you what I'm talking about. Suppose I looked at, pen please, -6 times 2. What gives me the negative? I'm looking at number 2. All right, I'm going to do -6 times 1. Well, -6 times 1 gives me the -6, but -6 plus 1 is going to give me a negative because the larger number is negative, but it's not going to give me -1. Okay, so it won't give me this down here. I get a -5 for the sum out of -1. So I can't use the factors -6 and 1. All right, so I'm going to try some other factors. So I'm going to try -3 and 2. Well, -3 times 2 is -6, and -3 plus 2 is -1. Now keep in mind, I let my larger number be negative simply because what was negative? This was negative here at the bottom. This was negative. So if this is negative, the larger number is negative. If this is positive, the larger number is positive. But that only applies if the signs are different to start off with, okay? All right, so definitely I'm going to mark out this. That didn't work. So I know -3 times 2 is -6, but -3 plus 2 is -1. So the numbers on the sides of the x are -3 and 2. Now I could have written it like this. I could have put 2 and -3. Where you place the numbers, in what order you place the numbers on the sides of the x, it doesn't matter. Okay? You just place the numbers on the sides of the x. All right, so let's take a look at number 2. If you look at number 2, I need two numbers that you can multiply to get -12. And because it's negative, I already know the signs have to be different. It has to be a negative and a positive. And then I need two numbers that I can add together. Sum just means add. To get -11. Well, if the signs are different, when I subtract, I need to get a negative. Okay? So I need my larger number to be negative because this is -11. All right, so the larger number is going to have to be negative. Larger number must be negative. All right, so I'm going to choose something like -6 times 2. Okay, that gives me -12. But -6 plus 2 gives me -4. So that's definitely not it, okay? All right, so now I'm going to choose -12 times 1. Well, that gives me -12. And -12 plus 1 gives me negative 11. So it's got to be these two factors, negative 12 and 1. Now you could have tried negative 4 and 3, but it wouldn't have worked because negative 4 plus 3 is negative 1, not negative 11. All right, look at number 3. Number 3, the 7 is positive. So since the 7 is positive, that means I'm multiplying a negative times a negative, or I'm multiplying a positive times a positive. So if you want to figure out whether you're multiplying two negatives or two positives, you simply look down here. If this number is positive, you're multiplying two positives. If this number is negative, you're multiplying two negatives. All right. So again, if these numbers are the same, well, these signs have to be the same up here to get a positive, then, like, for instance, these two have to be the same to get a positive. So if you choose two positives and this number is positive, this numbers have to be positive. If this number is positive, but this number is negative, then you need to choose two negatives. So this at the bottom tells you whether you need to put two positives or two negatives. Okay? I hope that makes sense. So because this is, when I add, because this is positive, I'm going to put two positives, okay? So I need two positives. Had that been negative, I would have needed two negatives, but that only applies if you have a positive product. That means the signs have to be the same. So I'm going to put, this has to be a positive times a positive. Now I would have put a negative times a negative only if this number down here had been negative, okay? All right, so let's go back and see what gives us a positive 7. It has to be a positive times a positive. So the only thing that gives you 7 is 7 times 1, and 7 plus 1 is 8. So it's 7 and 1. All right, I want to take a look at number 6. Kind of bouncing around. Let's take a look at number 6 because it kind of relates to what I was saying on number 3. So if you look right here, this top number is positive. So that means your product is a positive. In order for your product to be positive, you had to multiply positive times a positive, or you had to multiply negative times a negative. So what did I multiply? Positive times a positive or negative times a negative? So you look down here and you get a negative. So that means you had to multiply negative times a negative. Unlike up here, down here you had a positive, so you had to multiply positive times a positive. But down here you have a negative, so you have to multiply negative times a negative to get this positive 20. So it's going to be a negative times a negative. Well, negative what times negative what gives me negative 20? So I could just think about, well, negative 20 times negative 1. Okay, it gives me 20. But negative 20 plus negative 1 is negative 21. And some of you already know what this is. I'm doing this just to teach students who don't catch on as quickly. Okay, just going through some trial and errors. All right, so I also know that negative 10 times negative 2 gives me 20. But negative 10 plus negative 2 is negative 12. Okay, so that's not going to work. I don't like the way that looks, because it doesn't look like a negative 12. Looks all like it's ran all together. All right, so it gives me negative 12. That's not going to work. I'm looking for negative 9. All right, so let's look at negative 4 times negative 5. Well, that gives me 20. Negative 4 plus negative 5 gives me negative 9. So there's my 20 and negative 9. So the two factors have to be negative 4 and negative 5. All right, let's take a look at some others. All right, let's go to number 4. On number 4, you have a product of negative 8 and a sum of 7, okay? So this is negative. So if the product is negative, the signs have to be different. A negative and also a positive. Now you have to decide, is the larger number going to be negative or is the larger number going to be positive? So look down here. This number is positive, so the larger number must be positive, okay? So basically this sum down here helps you determine the sign. So if this number is positive, the larger number is positive if the signs are different. Over here, if this number is negative, both signs are negative because, when I say both signs are negative, because it has to be same signs in order to get a positive product. But here, when I say the larger number is positive, it's because these signs are different because I ended up with a negative product. All right, so this helps choose a sign. Positive, positive. Negative, two negatives, okay? Going back here. It was positive. So since it's positive, 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 because you got to have same signs to get a positive number at the top. All right. This product was negative, so you know you had different signs, but this number at the bottom was negative, so the larger number was negative. This was negative 6, so you know you had different signs. The number at the bottom was negative, so you know the larger number had to be negative. So that bottom number kind of helps you out a lot with the sign, okay? All right, so now what we're going to do is just kind of look through maybe some possibilities. So if you want the larger number to be positive, because your bottom sum is positive. So just remember when you're doing these possibilities, make your larger number positive. So if I chose 4 and negative 2, it gives me negative 8. But 4 plus negative 2 gives me 2. So I know it's not that. So now I'm going to choose something like 8. Remember, the larger number has to be positive. And negative 1. 8 times negative 1 is negative 8. And 8 plus negative 1 is 7. So I know my two factors are 8 and negative 1. All right, so what I want you to do is pause the video and try 5, 7, 8, and 9 for me, okay? And then unpause, and then you're going to check to see if yours matches mine. Okay, on number 5, the product is positive. So since the product is positive, the only way to get a positive product is to have same signs. Now, it's either going to be a positive times a positive or a negative times a negative. Look down here. This is negative, which tells you it's going to be a negative times a negative. Okay, so now I know that negative 3 times negative 4 is positive 12. And negative 3 plus negative 4 is negative 7. So my numbers on the sides of the x are negative 3 and negative 7. And let's look at the last three. All right, so the product at the top is positive. Again, the only way to get a positive product is to have a positive times a positive or negative times a negative. The signs have to be the same. So you look at your number in the bottom of the x, and it's going to tell you whether it's two positives or two negatives. Because this is negative, it's going to be two negatives. So I need a negative times a negative in order to get that positive product, but also a negative sum, okay? All right, so that's negative 4 times negative 4. It gives me positive 16. but -4 plus -4 gives me my -8. So the numbers on the sides of the x are -4 and -4. All right, top number on number 8 is positive. So I end up with a positive times a positive or a negative times a negative. Okay, just look here in your the bottom of the x. You got a negative. So that means it's going to be a negative times a negative. Okay, the only factors are 2 and 1. So it's -2 times -1, which is +2. And -2 plus -1 is -3. So your two factors are -2 and -1. Okay, if you look at the top on number 9, it's also positive. So I have, it's either going to be a positive times a positive or a negative times a negative. We'll look down here. That's negative. So it's going to be a negative times a negative. Okay, what negative number times another negative number gives you 18? Okay, you could try -2 times -9. That's +18. But -2 plus -9 is -11. Okay, that's not going to work. All right, -3 times -6 is +18. And -3 plus -6 is -9. So this is what works, not that one. So the two numbers on the sides of the x are -3 and -6. And you may be saying, why in the world is Miss Blue showing us this? Okay, we're going to use this to factor trinomials of the form x squared plus bx plus c. All right, let's move to the next page and actually get to factoring. Let me make this larger so you can see it. All right, so here we go. Now, factoring trinomials of this form should be really easy since we understand sum and product puzzles. All right, so with that being said, let's go ahead and get started on the notes. I'm going to recall double distribution. Double distribution is when you break up one like binomial factor and then keep the other one and then multiply the broken up one times the other one in two parts. So for instance, x plus 2 times x plus 5, and you can use FOIL if you want to, first, outer, inner, last. I'm just going to use double distribution. So x times x plus 5, I'm breaking up the first one, plus 2. So it's x times x plus 5 plus 2 times x plus 5. So I'm going to put my imaginary ones on those exponents so I can add. Because when you multiply powers with the same base, you add. Okay, use the distributive property. X times x is x squared. X times 5 is 5x. Move over here and use the distributive property. 2 times x is 2x. And 2 times 5 is 10. Okay, I'm going to combine the like terms. When you combine like terms, please don't change the exponents. Only add or subtract the coefficients. So I end up with x squared plus 7x plus 10. So these two factors produce the polynomial or the product x squared plus 7x plus 10. Well, if you look at this, look at what you have. This fits this form. It's of the form x squared plus bx plus c, where the leading coefficient is 1. Remember, a is the leading coefficient. So there is a way to take this and go back to that. So in other words, take the product and go back and get the factors, which is called factoring. Okay? That's what factoring is. You take a product or a polynomial and you go back to the factors that it took to produce that product or polynomial. You work backwards of the distributive property. All right, so we say that, I'm going down here. So we say that x plus 2 times x plus 5 is the factor form of the polynomial x squared plus 7x plus 10. But we're going to use that x method that we just learned with the sum and product puzzles to go from this back to that, okay? All right, let's move on down. All right, so to factor trinomials with a leading coefficient of 1, we will use the x method with sums and products. So that was the whole reason I wanted you to do sums and products, because it makes factoring trinomials of this form so easy. All right, I just want to move this way everybody can see it. Okay, everybody can see that. All right, now let's take a look at what we have. It says trinomial of the form x squared plus bx plus c, where your leading coefficient is 1, can be factored using this x method. So in the top, you're going to put your c. Your c is your constant, okay? Okay? And it's going to represent your product. So right here, I want you to write, and if you please write this down in your notes. That's your constant number. And it comes from right here. Okay? It represents your product, or what you multiply. Because the top of the x represents what we multiply to get a number. Okay, now look down here at B. B represents the coefficient of the middle term. It's the coefficient of the middle term. Okay, I need that to look better than that. It also represents your sum. Okay, because it's in the bottom of the x. So remember, anything in the bottom of the x represents the sum. Anything in the top of the x represents the product. So I'm going to circle this. Okay. It's that constant, and it represents your product. And then B is your coefficient of the middle term, and it represents your sum. So you just pick B from here and put it in the bottom of the x, whatever that coefficient is. All right, look at this where it has number 1. All right, so where it has number 1, it says, I'm never good at drawing these arrows. It says use the numbers you place on the sides of the x to write the trinomial in factored form. So notice I got some number, I got some number. So you're going to write x plus, or you could be plus that number or x minus that number, depending on what the signs are on the sides of the x, times x plus that number or x minus that number, again, depending on what these numbers are, on what these signs are on the sides of the x. I don't know. It could be a positive. Over here it could be a negative. So if this is a positive, you write x plus whatever it is, times x. If that's a minus, x. When a negative, you write x minus whatever it is. Okay? And that's all you do. Let me give you an example. All right, suppose I had x squared minus, we'll say 2x minus 6. No, that won't work. Okay, let me make up one. I'm going to erase that because I'm probably not sure I want to use that 2. Okay, x squared minus 6x plus 9. We'll just use that one. Okay, I know that's going to work out. Okay, so A is 1. The leading coefficient is 1. B here is negative 6. And C, my constant, is 9. C goes in the top of the x. B, my middle term, goes in the bottom of the x. All right, so what I want to do is I want to figure out what multiplies to give me positive 9. Okay, it's a positive. Okay, so I either have a positive times a positive or a negative times a negative to get that positive 9. Well, look at the bottom. This number is negative, which tells you you have a negative times a negative. So you have a negative. Okay, I don't like the way that's written. So you have a negative times a negative. All right, so that would be negative 3 times negative 3, which produces 9. And negative 3 plus negative 3 is negative 6. So the numbers on the sides of the x are negative 3 and negative 3. So this is what you write. Notice they had x plus or minus whatever number was on the side of the x, and then x plus or minus whatever was on the side of the x. So both of these have a negative sign. That's negative and that's negative. So instead of x plus, you're going to write x minus 3 for that negative 3 in one of the factors. And in the other factor, you're going to use the number on the side of the x, which is another negative 3. So you're going to write x minus 3. That's all you do. And if you were to use double distribution, it would put you right back at x squared minus 6x plus 9 if you distributed this here. Okay, I hope that makes sense, guys. It's really simple. All right, let's look at some examples. Some more examples, okay? I got 6, and then we'll finish with this lesson. Okay, let me get away from that and go here to see if I can spread it out better. Okay, that's much better. All right, so we want to factor these trinomials, and we're going to use the x method because all of them are in the form x squared plus bx plus c. So if I use the x method here, a is 1. Okay, I need the leading coefficient to be 1. B is 6, and c is 8. So I'm going to put 8 here and 6 there. Okay, and you just think to yourself, what multiplies to get an 8 but adds up to get a 6? Because this is positive 8, these signs will have to be the same, a positive times a positive. And the reason why I'm saying a positive times a positive is because this number here is positive in the bottom. All right, so with that being said, I'm going to take 2 times 4 and check it. I get 8. And 2 plus 4 is 6. So the numbers on the sides of the x are 2 and 4. So when I write my product, my factors, I just write x. And because this is positive 2, I put plus 2. And then when I write the other factor, I write x. And because this is a positive 4, I put plus 4. Okay, I'm done. That's all you do. You're finished. You have factored x squared plus 6x plus 8. Oops. All right, let's look at 2. A is 1, just like I want. B is negative 13. C is 40. C goes in the top of the x. It represents your product. B goes in the bottom of the x. It represents your sum. Okay, now because my product in the top is positive, I know the signs have to be the same. I either have a negative times a negative or a positive times a positive. Look here. This number is negative, which tells me I have a negative times a negative. All right, so I'm going to try negative 5 times negative 8. It's 40. Some of you may be pausing the video and trying different things on your own, and you can. Really, I suggest that. And you might try negative 10 and negative 4, but you would get negative 14 when you add it. But just keep trying until you get the numbers in the eggs. All right, negative 5 plus negative 8 is negative 13. So I'm going to write x minus 5 times x minus 8. You just use the numbers in the size of the x in your factors. Now, it didn't matter if which one you wrote first. You could have written x minus 8 times x minus 5. I don't care what order you put them in. Just use the numbers in the size of the x. All right, I want you to pause the video and try 3 through 6. And after you've tried those, unpause and see if yours matches up with mine. All right, let's take a look at number 3. A is 1, B is 7, C is negative 18. It's going to put negative 18 here, 7 there. Okay, because this top number is negative, I know that I had to multiply negative times a positive to get a negative. So these signs are going to be different. I have a negative times some positive. Now I have to decide, is the larger number negative or is the larger number positive? So you look down here. This again helps you a lot with the signs. So this is positive, so the larger number has to be positive, guys. So the larger number is going to be positive. So when I write my products, I make sure that that larger number is positive. All right, so I could go with 9 times negative 2. Some of you may be trying the 6 times the negative 3 first. I mean, if that's what you try, you should have eventually got to 9 times negative 2, which is negative 18. And 9 plus negative 2 is 7. Those give me the numbers in the x. So 9 and negative 2. So when I factor this, I factor it as x plus 9 because it's a positive 9 and x minus 2 because it's a negative 2. And that's that. That's all I do. All right, let's take a look at 4. A is 1, B is 2, C is negative 15. C goes in the top of the x. There's my 2. Because this is negative 15 is a negative, then I know the signs are different. So I have a negative times a positive. Now I'm going to look here. My sum is positive, so the larger number has to be positive. So you should think about factors of 15. Okay, what gives you 15? You can go with 1 times 15 or 3 and 5. So I'm going with 3 and 5 because 1 and 15, when you subtract those, you're going to get 14. Okay. All right, so the larger number has to be positive. So I'm going to do 5 times negative 3 is negative 15. And 5 plus negative 3 is 2. So this is just your check part over here. So you have 5 and negative 3. So you're going to write x plus 5 because it's a positive 5 times x minus 3 because there's a negative 3. And I'm going to write that negative 3 a little better. Okay, last two. A is 1, B is negative 8, and C is negative 20. So there's my negative 20. There's my negative 8. And I just think, okay, I got a negative 20, a negative product. Okay, so if it's negative, that means the signs have to be different. That means I have a positive times some negative. Now I have to decide, is the larger number positive or negative? Well, look down here. This number is negative, so the larger number has to be negative. When I look at the product, okay? All right, so what gives me 20? I can go with 4 and 5. Okay, but 4 and 5, or would that be 5 times negative 4 would give me 20, but 5 plus negative 4 is 1. That won't work. Let's try 10. Negative 10, larger number negative. Negative 10 times 2. Well, that gives me negative 20. The negative 10 plus 2 gives me that negative 8. So the numbers on the sides of the x are negative 10 and 2. So I'm going to factor this as x minus 10 times x plus 2. And again, if you use the distributive property, it's going to give you x squared minus 8x minus 20 if you wanted to work backwards and check it. All right, A is 1, B is negative 6, and C is 8. C always goes at the top, B always goes at the bottom. If you ever get confused, just think B for bottom. All right, so the top number is positive. So that means I either have a positive times a positive or a negative times a negative. Look down here. This is negative, so that tells me I have a negative times a negative. Okay, what negative number times another negative number will produce positive 8 but yet add up to negative 6? Well, that's going to be negative 4 times negative 2 and negative 4 plus negative 2, which is negative 6 here, and this is positive 8. Negative 4, negative 2. So the numbers on the sides of the x are negative 4 and negative 2, so I write my factors as x minus the number on the side of the x times x minus this other number because it's a negative 2 on the side of the x. It's really not x minus the number on the side of the x. It's just x minus 4 because it's a negative 4. It's x minus 2 because it's a negative 2. You're putting x with whatever numbers on the side of the x. All right, guys, that's it for factoring trinomials with a leading coefficient of 1.